There is something that has been hiding in plain sight since episode 6, and almost nobody gave it the attention it deserved. While everyone was focused on the bigger moments, the louder scenes, the more obvious plot points, two tiny doors were sitting quietly in the background, waiting for someone to notice them. One was red, one was blue. And if that sounds familiar, it should, because that exact same color combination showed up again in episode 7 during the button choice scene. Now, at first glance, you might think this is just a coincidence, a background detail the animators threw in without any deeper meaning. But when you look at both moments together and think about the direction the show has been moving in, it starts to feel like anything but a coincidence. The red door carries the visual energy of the digital circus itself, that bright, chaotic, artificial world that the characters have been trapped inside. And the blue door, the one that most people completely ignored, has a painting hanging next to it that vaguely hints at something else entirely, something real, something outside. And that detail alone quietly suggests that the exit Pomni has been chasing this entire time was never just a dream. It was always there. Hidden, yes. Out of reach, maybe, but real. This matters more than people realize because episode 8 is being built around the theme of an exit. That's not a theory, that's confirmed. But what most people haven't fully processed yet is what that actually means for every single character in the show, not just Pomni. The exit isn't just a plot device, it's the emotional core of everything that's about to happen. It's the thing that every character is going to have to confront in their own way, and depending on where each of them is emotionally right now, that confrontation is going to look very different for each person. Some of them are going to fight for it, some of them are going to be terrified of it, and at least one of them might try to stop it entirely. But before we get into the characters individually, it's important to understand the emotional state that everyone is walking into episode 8 with, because that context changes everything. Episode 7 ended in a way that nobody was fully prepared for. The characters weren't just disappointed, they weren't just confused, they were shattered. Everything they thought they understood about Cain, about the digital circus, about their situation, all of it got flipped upside down in a matter of minutes. And the most devastating part of it wasn't even the revelation itself. It was the fact that Cain seemed proud of it. He stood there in the aftermath of what was essentially the most traumatic adventure the residents had ever been put through, and he acted like everything was fine, like it was just another day. And that disconnect between what the characters were feeling and what Cain was projecting is going to be the emotional engine that drives the opening of episode 8. Because you can't just move on from something like that. You can't wake up the next morning and pretend it didn't happen. And the show knows that, which is exactly why the beginning of episode 8 is going to pick up in almost the exact same emotional place where episode 7 left off. The shock and the anger and the confusion, all of that is still going to be there at the start, and it's going to take something significant to pull everyone out of that state and point them towards something productive. That moment, whatever it ends up being, is going to be one of the most important scenes in the entire episode, because it won't just be about calming people down, it'll be about redirecting all of that raw emotion, all of that pain and frustration and broken trust into something that actually moves the story forward. And the way that happens, the specific character who makes it happen and the conversation that comes out of it, is something I'm going to break down in detail in the next section. But for now, just hold on to this. Episode 8 doesn't start with hope. It starts with the aftermath of losing it, and that's what makes everything that follows so much more powerful. What's also worth noting here is that episodes 7 and 8 were always designed as two parts of one larger story. This isn't just a fan theory or a loose interpretation, it's been pointed to directly. And when you look at it that way, the ending of episode 7 wasn't really an ending at all. It was a pause, a breath before the second half of something much bigger begins. Which means everything that felt unresolved, everything that felt painful and open-ended and raw, all of it is still very much alive going into episode 8. Nothing has been closed off. Nothing has been neatly wrapped up. The story is still mid-sentence, and episode 8 is where that sentence finally gets finished. Let's talk about Pomni first, because honestly, if there is one character who has the most to lose and the most to gain in episode 8, it is her. From the very first moment she arrived in the digital circus, the one thing that defined her more than anything else was the desperate, almost suffocating need to get out. Not to understand the circus, not to make friends, not to find her place, just to leave. And for a long time, that desire was the thing keeping her going. It was her anchor, the one thought she could always come back to when everything else felt overwhelming and impossible. And then episode 7 took that anchor and threw it into the ocean. The final scene didn't just disappoint Pomni. It didn't just set her back a few steps. It destroyed the dream entirely, at least on the surface. And now she's standing at the beginning of episode 8 with nothing to hold on to, no clear direction, no obvious next move, and the full weight of realizing that Cain has been controlling this entire situation in ways none of them truly understood. That is not a small thing. That is the kind of moment that either breaks a person completely or forces them to become something stronger than they were before. And I am more than sure that for Pomni, it is going to be the second one. Here is why I believe that so strongly. Pomni has been in the void. She experienced it in the pilot episode, that terrifying, empty, boundaryless space that exists somewhere beneath or beyond the digital circus itself. And at the time, it felt like the worst possible thing that could happen to someone in this world. But we have known since October 2023 that the void is actually the key. It is the way out. It is the escape route that has been sitting right underneath everyone's feet this entire time, completely unrecognized for what it actually is. Pomni doesn't fully know this yet, but she experienced it firsthand. She has a memory of it that none of the other characters have in the same way, and I am absolutely sure that episode 8 is going to bring that memory back to the surface. Whether it happens through a dream, through a conversation, through a moment of quiet reflection, I believe we're going to be shown Pomni's memories from the pilot episode, the void, what it felt like, what she saw. And when that happens, it's going to reframe everything, because suddenly the most terrifying moment of her journey becomes the most important clue she has ever had. And that shift from fear to understanding is going to be the foundation of Pomni's entire arc in this episode. Now, what makes this even more interesting is the fact that in recent episodes, Pomni has been somewhat sidelined as the central focus. She is still present, still involved, still clearly the main character in the broader sense, but characters like Jax have been getting more of the spotlight, more of the emotional complexity, more of the story weight. And I actually think that was intentional, because episode 8 is where Pomni takes that spotlight back. It is where the show reminds you, in case you forgot, that this is her story. The entire circus, the entire situation, the entire mess of emotions and broken trust and hidden truths, it all comes back to her. She is the one who dreamed of escaping the longest. She is the one whose hope was most directly destroyed at the end of episode 7, and she is the one who more than anyone else has a personal and emotional stake in what comes next. Episode 8 is not just going to feature Pomni, it is going to be built around her thoughts, her memories, her theories, and her decision about what to do next. And whatever that decision turns out to be is going to set the direction for everyone else. Now let's talk about Ragatha, because she is equally important in episode 8, just in a completely different way. On the surface, Ragatha hasn't changed much across the episodes. She's warm, she's supportive, she worries about everyone, and she does everything she can to keep the peace. Episode 5 gave us a glimpse of something deeper and more complicated underneath that cheerful exterior, but by the end of it, she had mostly returned to her usual self. The one meaningful shift was that her goal of becoming a genuine close friend to Pomni had finally been achieved, and that relationship, that bond between Ragatha and Pomni, is going to be one of the most important dynamics in episode 8, because Ragatha is not just going to support Pomni emotionally, she is going to be the emotional anchor for the entire group at a moment when everyone desperately needs one. Think about the state that every character is in at the start of episode 8, shocked, angry, disillusioned, not thinking clearly, not communicating, not working together. And this is not a new problem. Throughout the entire show, it has been the lack of unity, the inability to get everyone on the same page that has consistently blocked any real progress toward escape. Every time there was a chance for the group to come together around something meaningful, something got in the way. But episode 8 is going to change that, and I believe Ragatha is the one who starts that process. There is a very specific reason why I think the memories storyline begins with her. At some point in the episode, when the tension is at its highest and nobody knows what to do next, Ragatha is going to do something that seems small but is actually massive. She is going to start talking about her first day in the digital circus, her memories, her fear, what it felt like to arrive in this strange, overwhelming world and have no idea. If Pomni and Ragatha represent the emotional heart of episode 8, then Kinger and Jax represent something else entirely. They are the wild cards, the unpredictable elements, the characters whose next moves are the hardest to pin down, and whose involvement in the events of episode 8 could completely change the direction of the story, depending on how things unfold. And both of them, for very different reasons, are walking into this episode in a state that makes them more important than they have ever been before. Let's start with Kinger, because the more you think about his situation, the more fascinating it becomes. We already know that Kinger was one of the very first people to end up in the digital circus. We know he was involved in the development of this digital world before he became trapped inside it. And that combination, being both a builder of the space and a prisoner within it, gives him a depth of knowledge about the circus that no other character comes close to. He has been here longer than anyone. He has seen things that nobody else has seen. He remembers things that everyone else has forgotten or never knew in the first place. And for most of the show, that knowledge has been buried under layers of chaos and confusion, and what appeared to be a complete loss of mental stability. Kinger looked broken. He acted erratic. He seemed like someone who had simply been in this place too long and lost too much of himself to be a reliable source of anything. But episode 7 changed that completely. In the finale, we saw something we had never seen before. Kinger returning to his original state, calm, clear, rational, fully in control of himself in a way that felt almost shocking given everything we had watched him go through. And that moment is not just a character beat, it is a setup. It is the show telling you directly that the Kinger you are about to see in episode 8 is not the scattered, unpredictable version you got used to. It is the original version, the one who was there at the beginning, the one who knows where the bodies are buried, so to speak. And this is where it gets really interesting. Abel, who was created by Cain, made a very deliberate choice to keep Kinger out of the loop. When the plan was being executed, when the pieces were being moved into place, Kinger was intentionally excluded. And once you understand what Kinger actually knows, that decision makes complete sense, because a clear-headed Kinger with full access to everything he learned during the development of the digital circus and everything he has observed during his time trapped inside it would have seen through the deception immediately. He would have recognized the lie before it even had a chance to take hold. Cain knew that, and so Kinger was kept in the dark. But that protection is gone now. Kinger is clear, Kinger is present, and Kinger is about to become one of the most valuable assets the group has ever had, not just because of what he knows, but because of how he thinks. With full self-control restored, he is not just knowledgeable, he is wise. He can look at a problem from every angle. He can understand what other characters are going through on a deep level. He can find solutions that nobody else would even think to look for. And in episode 8, that combination of knowledge and wisdom is going to be absolutely critical. Now, Jax is a completely different story, and honestly, his situation heading into episode 8 might be the most surprising of anyone's. Because for a long time, the conversation around Jax was pretty simple. He was the bully, the one who made things difficult, who pushed people away, who seemed to operate from a place of pure selfishness and cruelty. And then, slowly, over time, that picture started to get more complicated. We started seeing cracks, moments of vulnerability, hints of something deeper and more painful underneath the performance. Episode 6 gave us a glimpse of Jax in a state of genuine fear, not aggression, and it reframed a lot of his earlier behavior. But episode 7 took everything to a completely different level, because the anger we saw from Jax in episode 7 was not like anything we had seen from him before. It wasn't performed. It wasn't a defense mechanism. It wasn't fear dressed up as cruelty. It was real, raw, genuine disappointment in Cain, in the digital circus, in the entire system he had built his worldview around, and most importantly, in himself. See, Jax had a philosophy, a life philosophy that he genuinely believed in and regularly promoted to everyone around him. Follow your archetype, know your role, stick to it, and everything will be fine. It was his answer to the chaos of the digital circus, his way of maintaining control and predictability in a world that had neither. And episode 7 destroyed that philosophy completely. Everything Jax thought he understood about how this world worked turned out to be wrong. The structure he trusted collapsed, and in that moment of collapse, something genuinely important happened inside him. The comfortable, predictable mask of the bully cracked, and what came out from underneath it was something much more honest, much more real, and actually, in a strange way, much more useful going into episode 8. Because Jax entering this episode in a state of pure, honest anger and disappointment means that for the first time, he is not hiding behind anything. There is no performance, no archetype to fall back on, no comfortable role to play. And that rawness, as uncomfortable as it is exactly what is going to allow Jax to finally move forward in a meaningful way. I genuinely believe that the beginning of episode 8 is going to be a turning point for him. Not a redemption arc in the soft, tidy sense of the phrase, but a redirection, a moment where all of that anger and energy stops being pointed inward and starts being pointed towards something real, something actionable. And when that happens, Jax